Then we did an interesting project. It was on Morse code. So the Army then has a course, 12 weeks, to teach people to be able to receive Morse code. So you're listening to static and you're listening to sounds, long and short, in that static. And then those sounds correspond to letters, and you're pushing a key on the keyboard that corresponds then to what that letter is. Now it's not in plain text, which means you're receiving groups of 5 letters which are not words and which don't make any sense. So it has to be translated then, but your job is to pull it out and get it down. Now the Army then spends 12 weeks, and they had a failure rate in some cases that was more than 50%. So it wasn't working. And the Army, in their infinite stupidity, said, well, the intelligence school is where you learn to receive Morse code. So they would take the brightest people in the Army and they would send them then to the code school to learn to receive Morse code, because they assumed that there was a correlation between high IQ and intelligence. Well, there is, but it's a reverse correlation. So actually, the better you score on a IQ test, the less likely you are going to be good at receiving Morse code. The people that are good at receiving Morse code grow up with crew-served radios that they carry around, and they listen to music continually, and they've got great auditory discrimination, but they don't score high on the IQ test, so they don't get sent to the code school. It was another thing that the Army didn't understand. So what happened was you'd start learning Morse code, and you could get up to about 12 groups a minute where you were copying it with 100% accuracy. And then what would happen is you'd go into what they called the void. So you'd walk in one day, and one day you were receiving at 12 groups a minute and getting everything right. And then all of a sudden, you started making 100% error. 100% error. From 100% right to 100% error. They called it going into the void. And people would stay into the void from several hours to several days to permanently. And some people never came out of the void. So the question was, and the Army didn't understand what was going on. So what was going on was that receiving Morse code at a high rate is an unconscious process. And up to 12 groups a minute, you can consciously do it. But beyond about 12 groups a minute, your unconscious has to take over. And when you went into the void, the conscious and the unconscious were competing. But when you came out of the void, then the unconscious had taken over, and you could go from 12 groups a minute rapidly up to 25 or 30 groups a minute. But you had to get through the void. So we'd made several suggestions. One is that you didn't need to consciously learn how to do it in the first place because that wasn't going to do anything for you, because your unconscious was what needed to be done in order to learn to receive code. So it should have been never taught consciously, and simply teach the unconscious from the beginning. You hear a sound, you push a letter. Also, I was able to walk into the code school, and I walked into a room, never been in it before, like this, looked around, saw people working, and said, your best students are him, her, and him. And your worst students are him, her, him. And the instructor's mouth drops open, and he said, how the hell did you do that? And of course I said, magic. So, but you could tell by their physiology. So the best people were sitting upright and they were typing in a relaxed fashion. The worst people were hunched over so they couldn't breathe. They were staccato, hitting the keyboard. And so the way you receive Morse code is the best people is they hear a sound and then they see their finger pressing down on a key and they press that key. So it's what we call synesthesia. You're going from a sound to a picture. And so it was a case then of beginning to train people to do that. And so the equipment they had wasn't designed to do that. And we made some suggestions around that. And they said, well, we don't want to change our equipment. We've just invested a lot of money in this. And we said, well, okay, then you can continue getting the same results you've always gotten. So.